CBS News Flash. I'm Matt Piper in New York. The next January 6th hearing intends to show evidence that former President Trump may have been warned that his election lies could result in violence. Testimony will come from officials from Arizona and Georgia, where Trump attempted to pressure them to overturn the 2020 election. You can watch the hearing at 1 p.m. Eastern on CBS. AAA is predicting that 48 million people will travel 50 miles or more from home over the July 4th holiday. While most will drive, the number of those traveling by air will actually be the lowest since 2011. And the Nobel Peace Prize that a Russian journalist auctioned off to raise money for young Ukrainian refugees sells for a record $103.5 million. For more news, download the CBS News app on your cell phone or connected TV. I'm Matt Piper, CBS News, New York.
Primary season rolls on today. Voters in Georgia and Alabama heading back to the polls for runoffs in several races that weren't decided last month. The most closely watched contest is in Alabama, where Donald Trump ditched one candidate in the GOP Senate race for his opponent. CNN's Kristen Holmes is live for us in Montgomery, Alabama, with more on this race. Kristen?
Good morning, Brianna. All eyes on the runoff here in Alabama to be the next Republican candidate for Senate. And as voters head to the polls today, one of those candidates, Congressman Mo Brooks, is lashing out at former President Donald Trump, saying Trump has no loyalty to anyone or anything but himself.
He was one of former President Donald Trump's staunchest allies.
Go get him, Mo.
A leading promoter of Trump's 2020 election lies.
Joe Biden lost and President Trump won the Electoral College.
Even delivering a speech at the now infamous Stop the Steal rally that preceded the deadly January 6 riot at the Capitol.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
But as Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks heads into today's runoff to be the state's Republican candidate for Senate, he is doing so without the support of the former president. Learning the hard way that when it comes to Trump, loyalty,
if given the opportunity, I will get even with some people that were disloyal to me.
Is not always a two-way street. After initially endorsing the conservative firebrand,
we're going to elect our friend Mo Brooks to the U.S. Senate.
Now Trump is backing Brooks' rival Katie Britt, the former chief of staff to retiring Republican Senator Richard Shelby. The former president once claimed Britt was, quote, not in any way qualified for the job. But that was when he was behind Brooks. As Brooks' campaign struggled, Trump jumped ship and accused Brooks of going, quote, woke for these comments.
There are some people who are despondent about the voter fraud and election theft in 2020. Folks, put that behind you. Put that behind you. Yes.
Brooks says he learned of Trump's decision from a reporter seeking comment.
He didn't have the courtesy or the chutzpah or whatever to let me know first, so it somewhat blindsided me this morning.
Despite the embarrassing episode, Brooks has continued to run as MAGA Mo, and insisting his refusal to say the 2020 results could be overturned was partly to blame.
I knew that when I gave him straight shooting legal advice, that it would perturb him because it's not what he wanted to hear, and I knew it would put my endorsement at risk, but I thought it was the honorable thing to do, so I did it.
Even so, Brooks still tried to win back Trump's support ahead of the runoff.
Game on!
But Trump ultimately sided with Britt, who is widely seen as the favorite on Tuesday after receiving the most votes in the May primary.
And his endorsement of Katie Britt comes at a time when the former president is trying to shore up his status as kingmaker in the Republican Party, particularly after a series of high-profile defeats last month. Brianna?
All right, we'll be watching. Kristen, thank you so much.
My team is going to be sitting down with the CEOs of the major oil companies this week and try to get an explanation how they justify making $35 billion in the first quarter. What they're doing, first of all, what they've done is they cut back on the refining capacity. all this stuff you hear about and you guys have to report. But Biden limited the amount of oil. They have 9,000 leases. 9,000 leases in the public land. And they should either use it or lose it.
It's really wonderful. You're my hero. You're
No,
amazing.
no,
Yes.
no.
As you quit a great acting career for this.
Not so great as you.
No, but pretty great.
Thanks so much.
But what you've done and the way that you've rallied the country and what for the world, it's really inspiring.
It's not interesting to speak about the war every day, just for audience, for different people. But for us, it's very important.
Yeah.
When people forget to speak about it, the influence and how to push to Russia, it's very difficult. Thanks to such people like you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can do it.
I feel it's hard to understand what is actually going on here if you haven't been here. We were talking about just the actual impact of coming here, and I just was in Irpin this morning, and
where you?
Irpin.
Irpin.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
morning. So
Mataro.
you saw everything.
Mataro. Yeah. I mean, so the level of destruction. You see it on TV. You see it on social media. It's something else to actually see it and feel it, and then to talk to the people.
It's been 28 days since the senseless massacre of 19 innocent children and their 2 teachers at Robb Elementary School. Much has been done, but much more needs to be done before this investigation is completed. There's compelling evidence that the law enforcement response to the attack at Robb Elementary was an abject failure and antithetical to everything we've learned over the last 2 decades since the Columbine massacre. 3 minutes after the subject entered the West Building, there was a sufficient number of armed officers wearing body armor to isolate, distract, and neutralize the subject. The only thing stopping a hallway of dedicated officers from entering room 111 and 112 was the on-scene commander, who decided to place the lives of officers before the lives of children. The officers had weapons, the children had none. The officers had body armor, the children had none. The officers had training, the subject had none. 1 hour, 14 minutes, and 8 seconds. That's how long the children waited and the teachers waited in rooms 111 to be rescued. And while they waited, the on-scene commander waited for a radio and rifles. Then he waited for shields. Then he waited for SWAT. Lastly, he waited for a key that was never needed.
When you see a fish this size, especially in fresh water, it's hard to comprehend. So I think all of our team was stunned. The fishermen themselves said that it was the largest fish that they'd ever seen. So I think the whole team was excited, surprised, and also this catch is hopeful. These big fish, it's not just a record. The fact that the fish can still get this big is a hopeful sign for the Mekong River, which recently, the Mekong River's facing a lot of challenges. So the fact that these fish are still getting this big was a good sign.
Delegates are meeting in Kenya this week for the latest round of talks on a global agreement to protect biodiversity. The UN warns that 1 million plant and animal species could be lost in the coming decades. 40 years ago, mountain gorillas were on the brink of extinction, but now, thanks to a huge conservation effort, their numbers are increasing. Our climate editor, Justin Rowlatt, has been to Uganda to see what lessons might be learnt.
This park is one of the last two places on Earth where mountain gorillas still survive.
So we're just hacking our way through the forest because obviously the gorillas go wherever they want. There are no paths up here. Have you seen something, Luke? Just around here. Ah, there's one down there. There's a gorilla. This is just incredible. You can hear the sound of gorillas all around us. You can't see most of them because the vegetation is so thick. But there are baby gorillas in the trees. Adults or juvenile gorillas on the ground. It's incredible to be so close to one of our closest relatives on Earth. And that, I think, was a gorilla fart. Wow.
The population is growing steadily. It is a dramatic turnaround. Sir David Attenborough feared he might be seeing the last of their kind when he visited a mountain gorilla family in the 70s. So how have the gorillas been saved? Conservation charities say this, ecotourism, is a large part of the answer.
Tourism really does help wild animals if it's done right. When I first started out, there were only about 5 lodges. Now there's as many as 70. The lodges have created jobs. The NGOs have created jobs.
But tourism alone will not be enough. The UN says the world needs to set aside a third of all land and sea to protect biodiversity.
We've been told by scientists we only have this century and we only have one planet. There's no planet B.
The mountain gorilla shows we can save species from the brink of extinction. The question now is whether the world is ready to commit the money and resources to make it happen on a much bigger scale. Justin Rowlatt, BBC News, Bwindi Impenetrable Forest.